Most people believe evil announces itself. They imagine it as something loud, something obvious, something that feels wrong the moment it appears. But history tells a different story. Sometimes the most dangerous things arrive quietly. They smile when spoken to. They follow instructions. They say exactly what you expect them to say, and because of that, no one sees them coming. In the summer of 1867, in a quiet farming region just outside Sedalia, Missouri, something like that began. It didn't start with violence. It didn't start with fear. It started with a child, 8 years old, Timothy Caldwell. If you had seen him walking down a dirt road that year, you wouldn't have looked twice. Small frame, pale skin that burned easily under the sun. Blonde hair kept short, clean, quiet, polite in a way that made adults nod with approval. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Always the right words, always at the right time, but there was something else, something harder to explain. People noticed it, but they didn't talk about it directly, not at first. It showed up in moments, small ones, a pause that lasted slightly too long, a look that didn't quite match the situation, an expression that stayed even when it should have changed. And then there were the eyes, pale blue, not empty, not distant, focused, too focused. Like he wasn't just looking at people, but studying them, breaking them down, understanding them. The way a doctor studies a patient, or a hunter studies movement before a strike. But no one said that out loud, because what kind of person thinks that about a child? Instead, they said he was quiet, different, maybe just affected by loss, and there had been a lot of that. Missouri in the late 1860s wasn't stable. The Civil War had ended, but its consequences hadn't. Families were fractured, land was damaged, communities were trying to rebuild with less than they started with. Men were gone, some dead, some missing. Some returned, but not the same, and children were often left to carry what remained. Timothy was one of them. His father died in battle. His mother followed not long after, illness. There wasn't anyone left to take care of him, so he was sent to live with his uncle, Thomas Caldwell, a man shaped by hardship, not cruel by intention, but not kind either. His wife, Sarah, had grown distant over time, years without children, years of struggle. They didn't want responsibility. But they needed help, and Timothy was both. When he arrived at their farm, it was early spring. The land was beginning to recover, but the house felt heavy, not broken, but worn, like something that had survived instead of lived. Timothy stepped into that space quietly. No complaints, no questions, just observation. He adjusted quickly, faster than expected. Within days, he understood routines. Within weeks, he became part of them, working fields, feeding animals, carrying water. And he never resisted, not once. That was what people noticed first, because children resist. They get tired, they complain, they push back. Timothy didn't. He worked from sunrise to sunset, without slowing, without distraction, without needing to be told twice. It should have been impressive. Instead, it made people uneasy because it didn't feel natural. One neighbor described it later as like watching something that didn't get tired. Not a boy, something else. But again, no one said that directly, because there was no reason to, not yet. At first, the changes were small, animals behaving differently, chickens refusing to cross certain areas, dogs backing away, horses shifting nervously when he passed. People explained it away. Animals are unpredictable. They react to things humans don't understand. That was normal until it was, because then things started dying, not all at once, not enough to cause panic, just enough to notice. One chicken. Then another, then two more. Found in the morning, necks broken, clean, precise, too precise, not torn, not scattered, placed, like something had ended them carefully. The explanation was simple. Foxes, predators, it made sense until someone looked closer and realized there were no tracks, no signs of struggle, no evidence of an attack, just death, controlled, intentional, and still no one connected it. Because the idea they would need to accept was something they weren't ready for. Not about a child, never about a child. Then came the first death, and everything changed. continuing the 60-minute cinematic voice-over script, fully expanded, plain narration, no labels. The first death didn't feel like a warning. It felt like an accident. That's what people told themselves. That's what they needed to believe. It happened near the edge of a shallow creek about a mile from the Caldwell farm. The water there barely reached knee-height. Children played around it all the time. It wasn't dangerous, at least it had never been, until that morning. The girl was found face down, half in the water, half on the mud, still, unmoving. At first no one noticed anything unusual, tragic, yes, but explainable. Children wandered, they slipped. They didn't always understand risk. That was the assumption, until Timothy arrived. He walked into the girl's family home without urgency, knocked once, waited. When the door opened, he spoke calmly. "I found her," he said. No panic, no hesitation, just a statement. The girl's father rushed past him immediately, didn't ask questions, didn't wait. Others followed, neighbors, family, word spread quickly. By the time they reached the creek, there were already people gathering, standing, watching, trying to make sense of something that didn't quite feel right. The doctor arrived shortly after, examined the body, checked for signs of injury, found none that stood out. "She drowned," he said, simple, final. People accepted it. Because it was easier, because it made the world feel predictable again, but not everyone was convinced. And the reason was Timothy, because when he described what he saw, something felt off. He didn't say much, but what he did say was exact, too exact. "She was lying on her side at first," he said, a pause. "Then she rolled forward." The doctor looked at him. "How do you know that?" he asked. Timothy didn't hesitate. "The mud is disturbed differently," he said, calm, precise. "Are two impressions." Silence followed that, because that wasn't something a child usually noticed or understood. The doctor didn't respond right away, but something had shifted just slightly, enough to register, but not enough to act on, not yet. The funeral was quiet, short. People spoke in low voices, shared condolences, then moved on. That's what people did. They adjusted. They had to. Life didn't stop, not even for something like that. But over the next few days, something changed. Not in the town, in how people looked at Timothy, just slightly, just enough. A second longer, a moment of hesitation before speaking, nothing obvious, nothing that could be called suspicion, but something close. Then came the animals, more of them, closer together, found in places they shouldn't have been, arranged. That was the word one neighbor used, arranged, as if their position mattered, as if it meant something. One farmer found two goats near the edge of his field, placed side by side, identical injuries. No signs of struggle, no blood where there should have been. It didn't look like an attack, it looked deliberate. People started talking more openly now, still careful, still quiet. But the tone had changed. This wasn't just bad luck anymore. Then the second death, an older man, well known, respected, found at the base of a rocky bluff. The fall should have explained everything, and for most people it did. He slipped, lost his footing, it happens. But again, Timothy was the one who found him. And again he described the scene, in detail, too much detail. "He didn't fall straight down," Timothy said. The doctor looked at him again. "What do you mean?" he asked. "He hit the side first," Timothy explained, a pause, "then rolled." The doctor studied the body, then the rocks, then back at Timothy, and for the first time he didn't answer immediately, because the boy was right. That was the moment suspicion began to take shape, not openly, not officially, but internally. Because now this wasn't coincidence. Two deaths, both discovered by the same child, both described with unnatural accuracy. Still, there was no proof, and without proof there was nothing to act on. But the doctor began to watch, not closely enough to draw attention, just enough to learn, and what he saw didn't make sense. Timothy didn't grieve, didn't react emotionally, didn't avoid the subject. Instead, he observed, listened, asked questions, not like a child trying to understand. Like someone collecting information. "How long does it take?" he asked once. The doctor looked at him. "For what?" he said. For someone to die, Timothy replied, no hesitation, no discomfort, just curiosity. The doctor didn't answer because there was no correct response to that, and that was when he realized something important. This wasn't normal curiosity, this wasn't trauma, this wasn't grief, this was something else. But before he could act on that realization, everything escalated, because the third incident was different. It didn't end immediately. A young boy disappeared, gone without warning, no sign of struggle, no evidence. The town reacted quickly. Search parties formed, people spread out across fields, woods, and riverbanks, calling his name, listening for any response. Timothy volunteered to help, of course he did, and no one questioned it, because why would they? He moved through the search calmly, focused. Efficient, he suggested areas others hadn't considered. Guided people through terrain he seemed to understand too well. And on the fourth day he found the boy in an abandoned well, hidden, overgrown, easy to miss. The boy was still alive, barely, breathing shallow, weak. People rushed to pull him out, carried him back, hoped, but it wasn't enough. He died later that night. And once again, Timothy had been the one to find him. That was the moment everything changed. Because now it wasn't coincidence anymore. It wasn't pattern. It was something else entirely, and the doctor knew it, even if no one else was ready to say it out loud. Something was wrong, and it wasn't going away. After the third incident, the town didn't feel the same. Nothing obvious had changed. People still worked, still gathered, still followed routines. But underneath it, something had shifted. A quiet awareness, not spoken but present, because now there was a pattern no one could ignore. And at the center of that pattern was Timothy Caldwell. The doctor felt it more clearly than anyone else, not because he had proof, but because he had questions, and those questions weren't going away. He began with observation, simple, non-invasive. He did confront Timothy, didn't accuse him. He watched from a distance, from moments that didn't draw attention, and what he saw only made things worse. Timothy didn't behave like a child processing trauma. He didn't avoid difficult subjects. He didn't react emotionally. He didn't even seem confused. Instead, he was consistent, calm, measured, too measured. One afternoon, the doctor approached him directly, not aggressively, just enough to test something. "You've been helping a lot lately," he said. Timothy nodded. "It's necessary," he replied. The wording stood out immediately. Necessary, not kind, not helpful, necessary. The doctor watched him closely. "You've seen a lot," he continued. Another nod. "Yes." No hesitation. "Discomfort. That doesn't bother you?" the doctor asked. Timothy looked at him, studied him, then answered, "It's information." The doctor didn't respond right away, because that answer didn't fit, not for a child. "What do you mean?" he asked. Timothy tilted his head slightly. "People react differently," he said. A pause. "To pain." Another pause. "To fear." The doctor felt something shift in his chest, not panic, recognition. This wasn't random, this wasn't confusion, this was analysis. "Why does that matter to you?" he asked. Timothy didn't answer immediately, then quietly, "It's important to understand." That was the moment the doctor stopped seeing him as a child, not fully, but enough. Because something about that response wasn't learned, it was internal. From that point on, the doctor changed his approach. Observation wasn't enough anymore. He needed evidence, something tangible, something undeniable. And to find that, he needed to understand Timothy's movements. Where he went, what he did when no one was watching, so he started asking questions, carefully, without drawing attention. Neighbors mentioned small things, Timothy spending time alone near the tree line, walking beyond the usual paths, disappearing for short periods. Nothing that sounded alarming on its own, but together it formed direction. There was one area mentioned more than others, a stretch of land just beyond the eastern boundary. Dense, uneven, avoided by most people, not because of danger, but because it was unnecessary. There was nothing there worth visiting. At least that's what everyone believed, until the doctor decided to go there himself. He didn't tell anyone, didn't bring help, because if he was wrong, he didn't want to create panic, and if he was right, he needed to see it first. The walk took longer than expected. The terrain was rough, overgrown, quiet, too quiet. Even the animals seemed to avoid it. No birds, no movement, just stillness. That was the first sign. Because nature rarely stays that silent. The second sign was the ground, disturbed in places, not heavily, but enough to suggest repeated use. Paths that weren't natural, subtle, but deliberate. He followed them slowly, carefully, and eventually they led somewhere. A shallow opening in the earth, half-hidden, easy to miss. A cave. From the outside it looked insignificant, just another break in the land, but as he stepped closer he felt it. A shift in the air, cooler, heavier. Something about it felt wrong. He hesitated just for a moment, then stepped inside. The light disappeared quickly, replaced by shadow and silence. His eyes adjusted slowly, and when they did, he saw it. At first, just shapes, unclear, scattered, then details, bones, small ones, animals, arranged, not thrown, not discarded, placed carefully. The further he stepped in, the worse it became. Tools, simple but used repeatedly, marks on the walls, lines, patterns, drawings. He moved closer. Looked carefully. They weren't random. They were studies, detailed sketches of anatomy, notes, observations, descriptions of injuries, reactions, time interval. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. This was method. The doctor felt something cold settle inside him, because now there was no doubt left. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intentional. And then he saw something else. The drawings changed. They became more detailed, more complex. And then they stopped being animals. They became human. Figures, positions, details that matched the incidents. The creek, the bluff, the well, everything. That was the moment everything became clear. Timothy hadn't just been present, he had been responsible. And worse, he had been learning the doctor didn't leave immediately. He should have. Everything in him said to turn around, walk out, get help. But he didn't, because something else had taken over, not curiosity, certainty. He moved further into the cave, slowly, carefully, trying to understand the full extent of what he was seeing. The air grew colder the deeper he went, thicker, and the smell became harder to ignore, not fresh, not recent, but lingering, embedded into the space itself. This place had been used not once, not occasionally, repeatedly, and everything inside it confirmed that. He knelt near one section of the wall, looked closer at the markings. They weren't random sketches, they were organized. Columns, patterns, symbols that repeated in ways that suggested structure, like records. He ran his hand along one section, then stopped, because he recognized something, a name, faint, but there. The name of the man found at the bluff, next to it notations, measurements, observations. The doctor pulled his hand back slowly. This wasn't just a place where things had happened. This was where they were studied, and that meant one thing. Whoever had done this hadn't been acting out of impulse. They had been learning. That realization settled heavily because it changed everything. This wasn't a series of accidents. This was a process, and processes don't stop on their own. They escalate. The doctor stood up slowly, his mind racing now, trying to connect everything. The deaths, the animals, the patterns, the questions, and at the center of it all, Timothy. He turned toward the cave entrance, ready to leave, and then he stopped because he heard something, footsteps, light, measured. Coming from behind him, he turned slowly, and there, standing at the edge of the shadows, was Timothy, no surprise on his face, no confusion, just awareness. "You weren't supposed to find this," Timothy said. His voice was calm, even. The doctor didn't move, didn't speak, because in that moment everything had shifted. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. "How long have you been doing this?" the doctor asked, his voice steady, controlled. Timothy didn't answer right away. He stepped forward slightly, just enough for the light to reach his face. "Does it matter?" he said. The doctor felt a chill run through him. "Yes," he replied. A pause. Timothy considered that, then spoke. "I needed to understand," he said. Understand what? The doctor asked. Timothy tilted his head slightly. The difference, he said. Between what? The doctor pressed. Timothy looked around the cave, then back at him. Between reactions, a pause, animals and people. The words were simple. But the meaning was, why would you need to understand that? The doctor asked. Timothy didn't hesitate. Because they're not the same, he said. Another pause, and I needed to know how. The doctor took a step forward. You hurt them, he said. Timothy shook his head slightly. I observed them. That answer landed harder than anything else because there was no guilt in it, no hesitation, no awareness of wrongdoing, just logic. They died, the doctor said. Yes, Timothy replied, again no emotion. You understand what that means? The doctor asked. Timothy studied him. Yes, he said, but that doesn't change the results. Silence filled the cave because that sentence didn't belong to a child. It belonged to something else entirely. The doctor felt his grip tight. You can't keep doing this, he said. Timothy didn't respond immediately. Then quietly, I haven't finished. That was the moment the doctor understood the full scope of the situation. This wasn't something that had happened. This was something that was still happening, and if it continued, more people would die. How many? The doctor asked. Timothy didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he said something else. They change when they know, he said. The doctor frowned. When they realize what's happening, Timothy continued. They react differently. A pause. I needed to see that. The doctor felt something shift, because now it wasn't just about what had already happened. It was about what Timothy was planning next. And that made one thing clear. He couldn't leave, not yet, because if he did, Timothy would disappear again, and the pattern would continue. He needed to act, but the problem was he was standing alone in a confined space, with someone who didn't think like a child and didn't feel like one either. The cave felt smaller now, not physically, but in a way that made every movement matter. The doctor stayed where he was, careful not to step forward too quickly, careful not to step back. Because either choice could change everything. Timothy stood a few feet away, still, watching, not nervous, not defensive, just aware. That was the part that made this difficult. If Timothy had been frightened, this would have been simple. If he had tried to run, the doctor could have reacted, but he didn't. He stood there as if this moment had already been accounted for. You need to come with me, the doctor said. His voice was steady, measured. Timothy didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked past him, toward the cave entrance, as if calculating something. That won't change anything, he said finally. The doctor took a slow breath. It will stop this, he replied. Timothy's expression didn't change. No, he said, another pause. It won't. The certainty in his voice was what made it unsettling, not defiance, not fear, certainty. You don't understand what you're doing, the doctor said. Timothy looked back at him. I do, he replied. Silence followed, because there was nothing in that response. That suggested confusion. The doctor took a careful step forward. You've hurt people, he said. Timothy's head tilted slightly again. They were already going to die, he said. The doctor stopped. What? He asked. Timothy didn't hesitate. Everyone does, he said. A pause. I just observed how. That answer shifted something, because now this wasn't just detachment, this was justification. You caused it, the doctor said. Timothy shook his head slightly. I accelerated it. The words echoed in the cave, cold, precise. The doctor felt something tighten in his chest. You don't get to decide that, he said. Timothy's expression didn't change. Someone always does, he replied. Another pause. They just don't say it out loud. That sentence lingered because it carried a logic that was deeply wrong but internally consistent. The doctor realized something then. This wasn't something he could argue his way out of. Timothy wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He had already built a system in his mind, and everything he did fit inside it, which meant the doctor needed to change his approach. You said you weren't finished, he said carefully. Timothy nodded. Yes. What's next? The doctor asked. A pause. Timothy looked toward the wall, then back at him. I haven't observed fear long enough, he said. The doctor felt a cold wave pass through him. What do you mean? He asked. Timothy answered calmly. They react differently when they understand what's happening, he said. A pause. I need to see that. That was it. That was the breaking point, because now this wasn't about what had already happened. It was about what was about to happen, and it was clear if Timothy walked out of that cave, someone else would die, soon. The doctor stepped forward again, more direct now. I'm not asking you any more, he said. You're coming with me. Timothy didn't move, didn't react, just watched him. Then slowly he took a step back, not running, not panicking, just creating distance. You can't stop it, he said. The doctor moved forward again. I can stop you, he replied. For the first time, Timothy's expression changed, not fear, interest, a small shift, subtle but real. Do you want to see? Timothy asked. The question caught the doctor off guard. See what? He said. Timothy didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured slightly toward the deeper part of the cave. There's more, he said. The doctor didn't move, because instinct told him this was a trap, not in the traditional sense, but something else, something psychological, a test, and if he followed, he might lose control of the situation entirely. I'm not going further, the doctor said. Timothy studied him again, then nodded slightly. Then you don't understand yet, he said, another pause, but you will. That sentence carried weight, because it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like certainty. The doctor stepped forward again, faster this time, closing the distance, because the longer this continued, the more control he lost. You're coming with me, he said again, firm, final, and this time Timothy didn't step back. He didn't move at all. He just stood there, waiting. For a moment nothing moved. The doctor stood just a few steps away, close enough now, close enough to act. And he knew this was the moment. If he hesitated, even slightly, he would lose control completely. Timothy didn't step back, didn't resist, didn't run. He simply watched. That made it harder, because there was no reaction to respond to, no fear to counter, no panic to use, just stillness. The doctor moved first, fast, closing the remaining distance in 2 steps. His hand reached forward, gripping Timothy's arm, firm, controlled. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then Timothy looked down at the doctor's hand, studied it, and then slowly looked back up. You're making a mistake, he said. The doctor tightened his grip. No, he replied, I'm ending this. Timothy didn't struggle, didn't pull away. That should have made it easier. But it didn't, because something about the lack of resistance felt wrong, like this wasn't the response that had been expected, or worse, like this was part of something already planned. Walk, the doctor said. He began guiding him toward the cave entrance, step by step, slow, careful. Timothy followed, without resistance. That was the part that made the doctor uneasy, because compliance in this situation didn't feel natural, it felt intentional. You think this stops anything? Timothy said quietly. The doctor didn't respond. He kept moving. If I stop, Timothy continued, someone else won't. That made the doctor pause just slightly, only for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Don't talk, the doctor said, but Timothy continued anyway. You've already seen it, he said. People don't change. They just hide it better. The doctor pushed forward again, ignoring him now, because this was exactly what he needed to avoid: conversation, engagement. That was where Timothy had control, and the doctor couldn't afford that. They reached the cave entrance. Light spilled in, harsh after the darkness. The outside world felt different, larger, safer, but the tension didn't leave, not yet. As they stepped out, the doctor adjusted his grip, preparing to secure him, to take him back. Did properly. And that's when it happened, not sudden, not chaotic, precise. Timothy shifted his weight just slightly, then turned fast, not to escape, but to break the hold. The doctor reacted immediately, tried to maintain control. But Timothy wasn't reacting like a child. He was calculating. He moved with intention, targeting the grip, the balance, the moment. The doctor stumbled just enough. And that was all Timothy needed. He pulled free, stepped back. Distance created instantly. For the first time, the situation flipped. Now the doctor wasn't in control, and Timothy knew it. "You should have left," Timothy said, not angry, not rushed, just stating a fact. The doctor steadied himself. "You're not leaving," he said, but the confidence wasn't the same because now there was space between them, and space meant options. Timothy glanced toward the tree line, then back at him. "You don't understand the pattern yet," he said. The doctor took a step forward. "You don't get to continue it," he replied. For a moment they stood there, neither moving, neither backing down. Then Timothy stepped backward, not running, retreating, measured. "You'll see," he said, and then he turned and ran. The doctor moved instantly, chasing him, through uneven ground, through trees, through terrain that slowed every step. But Timothy moved differently, not faster, smarter. He knew the land, knew where to step, where not to. The distance between them didn't grow quickly, but it grew steadily. And with every second, the doctor realized something he didn't want to accept. He might not catch him, and if he didn't, everything would continue, everything. The distance between them kept growing, not quickly, but enough to matter. The doctor pushed harder. Branches caught at his arms. Loose ground shifted under his feet, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't, because every second meant opportunity. And Timothy understood that better than anyone. Boy didn't look back, not once. He didn't need to. He already knew where the doctor was, already knew the terrain, already knew the outcome. That was the difference. The doctor was reacting. Timothy was executing. They broke past the tree line, out into open ground. Fields stretched ahead, uneven, exposed. For a moment, the distance stopped increasing. The doctor gained ground, just slightly, enough to believe he might catch him. "Stop!" he shouted. His voice cut across the field, sharp, desperate. Timothy slowed just slightly, not stopping, not surrendering, adjusting. He turned his head just enough to speak. "You're too late," he said, the words carried clearly. And then he changed direction, not straight ahead, angled toward something. The doctor followed, no hesitation, because now it wasn't just about catching him. It was about understanding where he was going. They crossed into another section of land, less maintained, overgrown. And then the doctor saw it, a structure, old, partially collapsed, an abandoned well, the same one, the place where the third boy had been found. Timothy was heading straight toward it, and suddenly everything became clear. This wasn't escape. This was continuation. The doctor pushed harder, closing the gap. "Stop!" he shouted again. This time there was urgency in it, because he understood now. If Timothy reached that well, something else would happen, something worse. Timothy reached it first, stopped at the edge, turned, calm, waiting. The doctor slowed as he approached, not out of fear, out of caution, because now this wasn't a chase anymore, this was a confrontation. "Step away from it," the doctor said. Timothy didn't move. "You still don't see it," he said. The doctor took another step forward. "There's nothing left to see," he replied. "That's where you're wrong," Timothy said. A pause. "They react differently when they know they can't escape." The doctor froze, because now the meaning was clear. This wasn't about the past. It was about what Timothy intended to do next. And then the doctor noticed something, movement, inside the well, subtle but there. His stomach dropped, because that meant one thing: someone else was down there, still alive. "How long?" the doctor asked, his voice tighter now. Timothy didn't answer directly. "Long enough," he said. The doctor stepped forward again. "You're going to pull them out," he said. Timothy shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. That was it. No more space for negotiation. No more time. The doctor lunged forward, this time with everything. No hesitation, no calculation, just action. Timothy reacted instantly, but not fast enough. The doctor grabbed him, pulled him away from the edge, forced him to the ground. They struggled, not like before. This time there was resistance, real resistance, because now control mattered. The doctor held him down, breathing heavy. "Where are they?" he demanded. Timothy didn't answer, just stared at him, calm even now. "You're too late," he said again. The doctor tightened his grip. "Where?" he repeated. Silence, then faint a sound from the well, weak, barely there, but alive. The doctor looked toward it just for a second, and in that second everything changed. Timothy moved, sharp, precise, breaking the hold, rolling free. The doctor reached too late. Timothy stood, took one step back, then another, and then he ran again, this time faster, and the doctor didn't follow because he couldn't. Because now there was something more important, someone still alive. He turned toward the well, dropped to his knees, looked inside, darkness. Then movement, a hand reaching, weak, desperate. The doctor moved instantly, because now the choice had already been made. The doctor didn't hesitate. He dropped flat against the edge of the well, reached down as far as he could. "Hold on," he said, his voice steady, firm, because panic wouldn't help, not now. The hand reached up again, weak, shaking, a child. "Still alive. Grab my arm," the doctor said, this time the fingers wrapped around his wrist. Barely, the doctor pulled, slowly, carefully. The weight resisted, not heavy but unstable. The walls of the well were uneven, loose stones shifted, one slip and everything would end. "Don't let go," he said. The grip tightened slightly. That was enough. The doctor pulled again, strain building in his arms, muscles tightening. Every inch felt like resistance. Then movement. The child rose, slowly, out of the darkness, until finally he reached the edge. The doctor pulled him over, collapsed back onto the ground, breathing hard. For a moment neither of them moved. Then the child coughed, air returning, life returning. The doctor turned toward him. "You're safe," he said, but even as he said it, he knew something wasn't finished, because Timothy was gone, and that meant this wasn't over. By the time others arrived, it was already too late. The doctor had carried the child back toward the main road, shouting, calling for help. People responded quickly. Neighbors, workers, anyone close enough to hear. The child was taken, wrapped, carried inside, alive, barely, but alive. That part mattered, because it was the only thing that went right. When the doctor tried to explain what happened, the reaction was immediate. Search parties formed again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was urgency and fear, because now people understood. Something had been happening, and they had missed it. Or worse, they had ignored it. They searched for Timothy for hours, fields, woods, every place he had been seen before, but this time he didn't appear, no tracks, no direction, nothing, as if he had simply disappeared. The cave was found later that evening. The doctor led them there, showed them everything, the drawings, the tools, the remains, and this time no one explained it away. No one called it coincidence. No one called it misunderstanding, because now there was no doubt left. The town changed after that, not immediately, but permanently. People watched more closely, spoke more carefully, and trusted less, because something had broken, not just safety, understanding. The official record would later describe the case in simple terms: unusual behavioral disturbance, tragic incidents, unresolved disappearance. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was harder to define because it didn't fit into anything familiar. Timothy Caldwell wasn't driven by anger. He wasn't reacting to trauma. He wasn't confused. He was aware, deliberate, curious in a way that didn't include empathy. And that was the part no one could explain, because it raised a question that didn't have a comfortable answer. What happens when someone understands human behavior but doesn't feel it? Years passed. The story faded, as most stories do, replaced by new ones, covered by time, but not completely forgot, because some details remained. People still talked about the cave, in low voices. They remembered the drawings, the precision, the intent, and the way everything had been recorded, not like chaos, like study. And sometimes, when the subject came up, someone would ask the same question. Not about what happened, but about what didn't. They never found him. No trace, no evidence, no explanation. And that was the part that stayed with people, because it meant one thing: the story didn't end. It stopped being visible. And that possibility was far more unsettling than anything else. Because if something like that could exist once, it could exist again. quiet, unnoticed, waiting just like before.